Salutations, Legion of Doom. Welcome to Podcast The Storm, where socially awkward outcasts, crazy weirdos, and all-around nerds convene to talk and debate pop culture. With me, as always, is my co-host, the Nerdy Occultist, aka The Authenticator, Dalton L. Mortimer.
Hello, everyone.
And I'm your host / Timeline Wannabe, the Brainstormer of Pop Culture. How's everyone doing tonight?
I am doing okay. It was a weirdly uneventful week for the most part.
Which makes it an event onto itself.
Yes, oddly.
Yeah. And to Hill29, good to see you too. So we are going to be trying to wrap up an article we had started last week, but since it's so stupid that we kept getting sidetracked. Hopefully we don't get sidetracked again, but whatever happens.
Yeah, there's enough meat on this particular carcass to feed us the entire time. So who knows how far we'll actually get.
So right, if you want to see the first half or first quarter, I guess, go check out Podcast The Storm number 70. We have our playlist of podcast episodes is updated, so if you want to go check that out, go check it out. But yeah, we're going to start with this. And for those who don't have the time for that, we are discussing a Time magazine article called "We're Re-Examining How We Portray Cops on Screen. Now it's time to talk about superheroes." And like I said, we had covered the first part at great length last week.
Yes, basically the short version is this person thinks that police and superheroes are equivalent and both are somehow patriarchy, and thereby we dismantled her argument. Or is it a her? I don't even remember who wrote this.
I believe it was a her. Ilana Doctorman.
Okay, yes. Yeah. She essentially thinks that because both superheroes and police officers are classically considered to be some kind of semblance of order, that is somehow oppressive and that we need to do away with both of them. Or something.
Someone who dresses up in super costume and oppresses people is not a superhero.
Yeah, that's what the moniker of supervillain is for.
Yep.
But moral relativism, so here we go.
Yeah. Okay. So this part is called A New Kind of Hero. It's the second part, actually. And here we have a picture of T'Challa and Killmonger, which I think is actually one of the better scenes in that movie. I barely remember, to be honest, because I haven't watched it in years.
Yeah, I think I might have watched it maybe 3 times, maybe.
I think we've talked about Black Panther and like its faults and stuff before, so let's not get into that.
I mean, I like it. It's a pretty good MCU movie, but it's not worthy of quite as many accolades as it gets.
It's
something black culture.
It's got its like we said, it's got its faults. Maybe we might do if possible, we might do a review of the entire MCU up until this point for like a special or something. I don't know.
I think we should at least wait until like the end of Phase 4, because at least by then we'll know kind of where the MCU post Endgame is going.
Yeah. Okay.
And then we can kind of extrapolate from wherever they decide to go post Endgame, where they'll end up.
Right. Okay. So starting forward, there is some history of reckoning with policing in black superhero films.
Okay, but there's also a history of reckoning with policing in every superhero film almost. Or at least every superhero that is street level enough that policing is an issue that they would have anything to do with.
Yeah.
It's kind of the whole point of the costume vigilante that is the superhero.
Mm-hmm.
The whole point is cops are corrupt or incompetent or simply naive or unprepared or any number of other things, and therefore a conscientious civilian objector with abilities or skills or knowledge that goes above and beyond the norm has to rise to fill the gap in a unlawful or chaotic or unstable world. That's basically street level superhero 101.
Yeah.
Shit.
Blade, the 1998 Wesley Snipes superhero movie, launched a superhero movie boom we're still in today, giving Marvel its first box office smash.
And I know this is completely immaterial to the point that she's actually trying to make, but I hate that we call the era we're currently living in now a superhero boom, because there's only like 6 to 8 superhero movies in Hollywood as a whole, like the entire, like in a single year.
If it was a
And
boom, I'd assume there'd be 20 every year, right?
yeah, like in every other genre, like how many horror movies come out every year? How many action movies come out every year? How many like like even westerns are a bad example because westerns
Sci-fi.
oversaturated and then died for a bit, but even they're starting to make a regular comeback now.
Yeah.
And yet 6 to 8 superhero movies, not even 10 superhero movies, is enough to constitute a boom. I find that incredibly condescending.
Mm-hmm.
The only way you could justify that is because superhero movies make up so much more influence on Hollywood. But the thing is, if 6 movies or 8 movies can have more of an impact on Hollywood than 10, 20, or 30 movies, then by my calculations, that means that those 10, 20, or 30 movies are not doing their job correctly, and those 6 to 8 movies are doing their job really, really well and connecting with the audience. Therefore, they deserve the clout and influence they have
Right.
by the sheer numbers.
Well, I mean, also if you, well, she specifies superhero movie boom, but I was going to bring up the fact that I'm sure there are a lot more quote unquote superhero TV shows than there are movies, for the most part, in the last 20 or so years.
Yeah, but that's a completely different conversation.
Right. Yeah. All right. The movie, written and directed by white men, references tensions between black communities and the police.
Why in God's name did you bring up the race of the people who wrote it?
I'm gonna get a drink.
But okay, seriously though, but why did you bring up the race of the people that wrote it unless you are saying that the race of the people that wrote it had some particular impact on the movie? And if you're saying that because it was written by white people, it was somehow substantively different than it would have been had black people written it, then that in and of itself is a claim, and bringing special attention to it implies it's more important than other factors of the movie. And if you're going to put special weight or special attention onto a factor, thereby weighting it against other factors, then you need to justify and demonstrate why that factor in particular is more important. And once again, I want to point out this. Identities are not teams. White people don't subscribe to some weird ideology of whiteness. Not every white fucker is Richard goddamn Spencer or David Duke. Just like not every black person is freaking Eric Killmonger, if we're gonna make comic book references. To say that there's some universal whiteness to be had, and that somehow invalidates the opinions of any individual white person having any say-so over a black project, it's baffling, it's wrong-headed, and it's logically incoherent. So, fail. I award you no points. May God have mercy on your soul, etc. Moving forward.
Right. Okay, hold on. In one scene, two cops walking on Blade fighting what is clearly a monstrous vampire and begin shooting at Blade instead. Okay. I remember that scene. It's a funny scene because one thing, it's also the first time Blade actually talks.
Mm-hmm.
They're shooting a guy. One is built in tactical gear and has a sword strapped to his back.
Mm-hmm.
And didn't the vampire jump out of the way of the cops?
Yes.
So I think they were also shooting at the vampire. So if anything, they were shooting at both questionable characters that seemed beyond normal, regular, everyday people understanding. Which
yeah,
and
to borrow a trope from what is fast becoming my favorite fantasy series, The Dresden Files, humans are stupid. They would rather come up with any number of rationalizations than deal with the fact that supernatural shit exists in their universe and that there are things beyond their control or their understanding. So it's possible that even if it had been a semi-normal looking character, given the weird supernatural shit that was going on, they would have hyper-focused on the person just so they could ignore the vampire existing.
Right, also,
normal people don't like dealing with that shit. They don't like dealing with the idea that there are genuine things that go bump in the night. So they rationalize and they ignore things that are right in front of their face so they don't have to deal with it. Because otherwise their minds break. Go ahead, sorry.
Also, it's shown that there are regular everyday people that work for the vampires. Familiars, I believe.
Yeah.
We should say those cops couldn't have been them. I mean, granted, they didn't act like familiars. Like they weren't constantly trying, so they could have just been regular people, but still, that's a possibility.
Again, that I chalk up to the human capacity to ignore shit that's right in front of your eyes because it doesn't jive with your narrative. Kind of like what you're doing here now. Because, and this is the other point, had Blade, for whatever reason, been white, they would have done the exact same shit. At no point was Blade's blackness a factor in why they reacted that way.
That was a funny scene, to be honest.
Yeah. It had to do with the fact that cops are stupid, as is usually the case in superhero shit. And humans don't like dealing with things that are beyond their control because we prefer to think that we have all the knowledge we'll ever conceivably need.
Right. Blade turns around and asks, "Are you out of your damn mind?" It's played as a throwaway moment, but one that rings true decades on. Okay, for one thing, the full quote is, "Motherfucker, you out your damn mind?"
Yes.
So if you're going to
And-
quote something, quote it right.
Yes. And also, yeah, it is a fair question, but it has nothing whatsoever to do with black relations with other races or whatever the fuck. It has to do with the fact that people act without thinking and do stupid, comprehensively idiotic shit because they don't actually bother to think, or they don't bother to look, or they don't bother to observe the world around them, or even the world inside their own goddamn heads, so that they can be logically consistent within themselves. That is why that quote is applicable or universal in some way. It's not because that's the way cops deal with black people or whatever the fuck narrative I'm sure you're about to spin. It's because humans are stupid, and humans in positions of authority are even more stupid because they're allowed to be. Moving on.
Mhm. All right, so more recently, racial injustice has become the centerpiece for some superhero films. The clearest example of that shift is Black Panther, Ryan Coogler's 2018 superhero movie that takes as its main subject the oppression of bi B, BIPOC people worldwide.
It's the shorthand is BIPOC, but it means black and indigenous people of color.
Okay, and I guess we're talking about Black Panther again.
Yeah, and also before you go ahead and sing the praises of Black Panther, my dear, Black Panther, including those themes, was not an organic shift or a reaction to something cultural. It was a deliberate attempt to spin a narrative because that was the moral cause du jour of the day. It wasn't like the black equivalent of Joker, which was genuinely kind of an organic grassroots reaction to something. It was a bunch of people deciding that this should be more important, so we're going to force it down people's throats. Granted, they did it much better than they did later on vis-a-vis feminism and Captain Marvel, but
Uh,
it's still not an organic shift. Some it's not reacting to something organically out there in the world. It's forcing the issue and then giving yourself credit for forcing the issue, basically. That's what you're doing.
right.
You're saying, why don't other people force this completely irrelevant issue? Because they would be forcing a completely irrelevant issue is why. It's the cinematic and thematic equivalent of astroturfing, darling. Moving forward.
Mhm. And also, that's not entirely not entirely the issue that's brought up in the film. It's more of the isolationism of.
Wakanda.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know why I blanked on that, but yeah, that's mainly it. And also that I'll be honest, I think it also comes with the whole great power, great responsibility thing. Like Wakanda has all this power, and they're not really doing anything to try and help make the world better.
Yeah, they have these resources that are like a century ahead of the rest of the world, and yet they've just been sitting in the middle of the African desert or the African grasslands for centuries, just basically doing nothing.
Mm-hmm. Although, I don't know, I'll maybe for another time. It was just a video I remember watching on how technically Wakanda would actually be a very poverty-stricken country.
Kind of, yeah.
And, but it's comic book world. I'm not going to argue with that.
Well, yeah, and there also are like in-universe justifications kind of for why they aren't and so forth. Like
And,
they literally had a patron deity be like, here is how you can use this resource I gave you for this purpose and this purpose and this purpose. So
Yeah.
I'm going with literal Deus Ex Machina. The cat god did it, and we're moving on.
Alright. In that movie, Black Panther, aka T'Challa, Chadwick Boseman, rules over Wakanda, a secluded, scientifically advanced African country unfeathered by colonialism. Okay? And?
Yeah. Again, I second that, and
He faces off against a would-be usurper named Killmonger, Michael B. Jordan, who argues that Wakanda must abandon its policy of isolationism and help combat systemic oppression across the world. You know,
well,
by the end of the movie, I'm sorry.
he was also kind of arguing that they should conquer the rest of the world, but don't let that get in the way of your narrative, darling.
Well, also, I remember some people mentioning this when they talked about it, is that by the end of the movie, Killmonger becomes basically Black Hitler.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, to be fair, Michael B. Jordan gave one of the best performances in that movie.
Yeah, and also Killmonger is one of the most well-rounded Marvel movie villains we've gotten in the MCU. So good on you. But that being said,
He's a villain.
Yeah, like unambiguous, and there is a certain level of, is he sort of justified for this because his family abandoned him and because, the various things that happen to black people and so on? Sure, but at the end of the day, he officially takes that possibly very good point and turns it into, let's conquer the world and ethnically cleanse all the oppressors, quote unquote.
And to quote Gandhi, an eye for an eye makes the whole world go blind.
Yes. Although apparently Gandhi was racist enough too that they actually tried to remove several statues of him recently. So I don't think there's any way out of that, unfortunately.
People are stupid. That's just great on that.
Yep.
Alright, T'Challa eventually discovers that his own father and Killmonger's father had a similar debate in the 1990s. When Killmonger's father was deployed to America as a spy, he became radicalized by the racism he saw there. See, now that actually sounds like an interesting movie to watch.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
But the funny thing is, it would basically end up kind of like a black version of Joker if they did make a movie about that. And then all of a sudden becoming radicalized because of the world around you or because of the civilization you find yourself in would be totally justified to these people. This is the problem. They simply don't possess the self-awareness to apply their standards universally. When Black Panther, or when Killmonger's father gets radicalized by his situation and his surroundings and his mental issues, whatever they may be, then it's totally justified because fight the power. But when Arthur Fleck gets radicalized as a result of his civilization and his mental issues, then it's the scary white man.
You just wanted to mention Joker, didn't you?
Well, no, but it's because these people. It's the lack of consistency that pisses me off. We can do this incredibly convoluted story because we are in the moral right. But if you guys try to make a similar point with a similar character, but they happen to not feed into our narratives, then that's bad automatically. When Killmonger's father does it, nobody bats an eye, but when Arthur Fleck does it, everybody loses their fucking minds. And yes, I just used a Heath Ledger Joker quote talking about the Arthur Fleck Joker. I don't even care.
Still, though, I feel like you mentioned Joker because you wanted to talk about that film because you haven't talked about that.
Well, yeah, because it's a good movie, and it is a perfect example of how these people are ignorant fucking hypocrites because they don't understand that if a rule is worth following for one set of people, then it should be universalizable, and if it's not universalizable, then maybe we should question whether it's applicable to even the single individual.
Right. Okay. So, yeah, he smuggled weapons from Wakanda to help Black people suffering in America. When T'Challa's father confronts Killmonger's father, the latter argues their leaders have been assassinated. Communities flooded with drugs and weapons. They are over-policed and incarcerated. All over the world, our people suffer because they do not have the tools to fight back. Killmonger's father eventually loses his life for his political stance. No, because he pulled a gun on and tried to kill Zuri.
Yep.
Granted, I'm sure there were other ways to handle that, but still.
And also not to pick at the internal justification of the film or anything, but you do know that people in Africa see themselves as individual countries first, right? It's not like, and I'm gonna get shit for this, but Black people don't have an automatic hive mind. There is no reason. I mean, there might be a reason in universe, but out of universe, out of context, there's no reason why Killmonger's father would consider African American people to be an extension of his people. I mean, look at just as a actual historical example, the absolute genocidal hissy fit that was thrown between the Tutsis and the Hutus in Rwanda. Both were African people, were African types of people, but there was a genocide committed against both of them at different points because they were considered to be different kinds of Black people and different tribes of Black people. So what? So apart from the fact that it's a movie and we need a narrative that's compelling and interesting and shit, why would Killmonger's father consider Black Americans to be an extension of his people? That never fully gets explained, really.
You know what would have been interesting? T'Challa's father takes and imprisons his brother, and like in secret, like he's a secret prisoner, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we don't find this out until a little bit later in the movie. And Killmonger frees his father. And instead of putting himself, like Killmonger putting himself on the throne, he puts his father on the throne.
Of course, that would make it even more like Lion King, because the evil, the traitorous uncle would wind up on the throne.
But what if, in all the time, Killmonger's father has been in there, he's finally just come to the realization that he was wrong, and he tries to get his son to feel that way, see that.
That would be interesting, especially if at one point, post getting all juiced up by the Black Panther juice, which he steals, Killmonger snaps and kills his father by accident in the midst of them having this argument, or one of these arguments. But instead of taking responsibility for it, he blames T'Challa, and he blames the quote unquote oppressive white people, and that's what makes him go all, and now we need to conquer the planet thing.
Kind of puts a more tragic spin on the character.
Yeah.
Then some people have said like he was like I believe Macbeth or some Shakespeare character, I believe. Would have made more sense then.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, Killmonger's father wasn't killed for his political stance. It was because he tried to kill someone. I mean, granted, in a way, it was kind of a justified killing
Hmm.
to the character because that character kind of betrayed him greatly.
Yeah, which he did. But that being said, if you're gonna pull a weapon on a motherfucker, then don't be surprised when the other people with weapons in the room happen to outgun you.
Yeah. All right. So T'Challa's arc is to realize his nemesis is right. While Killmonger and his father broke laws and enacted violence for their cause, their conviction that people of color have historically lacked the tools to fight systemic oppression was correct.
And again, there's no explained reason apart from narrative convenience and ideology why the people of Wakanda would consider African Americans to be an extension of their people. As I just provided with the Rwanda example, there are cases in Africa where various African tribes will go to and African sort of subsets will go to war with each other over shit, even if they're very closely genetically related. So yeah, no. And also he doesn't really realize that Killmonger is right about he's not right in terms of his ideology or his conclusions. The only thing he do with this. It really has nothing to. He doesn't. Okay, if the movie ended the way you are talking about it, my dear, what would have happened is, Wakanda would have taken in a bunch of African American and other, um, quote unquote, colonized black people refugees, and then closed their borders again. That would have been the movie ending the way you're describing it ending. What actually happened was T'Challa essentially said that everyone, whether they be black, white, or any other color, should benefit from our advanced technology specifically because we have advanced. And it honestly, and this is the kicker, the justification that T'Challa had for opening Wakanda to the rest of the world is exactly the same justification in a lot of ways as the British used to colonize everybody back when the British were the most powerful empire in the world, because they genuinely thought that everywhere that wasn't a part of Christendom was backwards and barbaric and heathen. Therefore, um by spreading English liberalism mixed with like um Christianity, they were civilizing the people that they come across. Essentially, T'Challa wants to do the same thing. He his justification is because we are more advanced, we have a responsibility to those less advanced than us, and we need to advance them by letting them have access to our culture and our traditions and our technology, which is exactly how the British Empire justified itself. It's because we're the most advanced civilization on the face of the planet right now, we should spread that advancement to everybody else and hopefully raise them all up. Now,
You know,
that's extremely condescending because it assumes that every other culture is shit and barbaric, but it's also not entirely wrong, as is the case with Wakanda as well. It's not entirely wrong. They are categorically more advanced than the rest of the world. But I'm just pointing out that colonialism you hate so much, that colonialism that still sticks in your craw several centuries from several centuries from when it actually happened. If you really look at Black Panther, T'Challa kind of has the same justification as those colonialists.
technically, he is. Technically, Wakanda is like a Republican state.
Kind of, yeah.
Well, not Republican, more conservative, I guess.
Well, I mean, they literally, at least as far as the movie portrays, basically are an ethno state. They're just a black ethno state instead of a white one.
Well,
And
to be fair, that's just Africa in general.
right, but still, I'm just saying, if it was a country full of white people that were keeping advanced technology from the rest of the world, you would call them selfish and foolish and stupid. But
Again,
because it's Wakanda,
again, the thing is, like, change all the races of completely reverse the characters' races.
mhm.
Like, say where, well, I don't know what I'd be then. Well, whatever. But the whole point is, again, the whole parallel universe thing where white people were the ones oppressed and there was black people who were basically on top the whole time. Same issues.
Yeah, doing a a moral and color-based palette swap doesn't really change anything. It just changed the terminology around a little bit.
Right. Okay. So this weird thing talking about. Anyway, moving on. T'Challa eventually comes to represent a compromise between these two viewpoints. He uses his relative privilege to empower people who have been held back by colonialism and racism, but finds nonviolent methods to do so.
By essentially being, as I just went over, a colonialist. By using the exact same reasoning that the old British Empire used to. We are more advanced, therefore we owe it to the less advanced people to help advance them. It's the same. It's literally almost word for word the same justification that the British Empire had for like missionary work and the spreading of Christianity, because otherwise the poor people will be left to be backward and primitive and barbaric for the rest of time. So if colonialism is this terrible, terrible, evil thing that you want to say it is, then let's not ignore the fact that T'Challa is doing what he is doing for the exact same reasons that I don't know, like King George the First had for wanting to expand the British Empire. The only difference is T'Challa doesn't declare the rest of the world an extension of Wakanda at the end. He just gives them the advanced technology and education and expects that that will solve itself, which it sort of does because, of course, happy endings and all that jazz, but still. Moving on.
Mm-hmm. At the end of the movie, T'Challa opens a community center in Killmonger's hometown, Oakland. He asks his girlfriend to run a social outreach program for black communities and his tech-savvy sister to head up an education program. Same sorts of community investment that activists calling to redistribute police budgets into social support systems are now calling for. You know, I don't think the police budget, if I remember correctly, a lot of the times police budgets aren't that great either.
Yeah, and that in and of itself is part of the problem.
Mm-hmm. So you want to cut an already kind of flimsy budget for people
Yeah,
who.
yeah, you're basically going, the police are currently inadequate. So I know what we'll do. We'll make it even harder for them to ever be adequate. And then we'll complain about the spikes in crime.
Motherfucker, do you hear the shit coming out of your mouth?
Yeah, like does it not occur to you that if the problem is police are so overburdened that it's making it easier for the bad police to do what they do, and it's making it harder for the good police to do what they do, then how is it that you can justify cutting that? And here's the other thing, and I hear this all the time. It used to be that every community would have its own like police precincts and shit. Whereas now it's a lot more distant. Like you'll have large swath of city um accountable to people that are like um several like streets over or whatever the fuck. And I've heard people in various communities say it was better when we had local police officers. So don't you think that it might just help if instead of making people who have no personal investment in the communities they're serving have power over those communities, what if instead of pulling back all the police, we give each individual like neighborhood its own police network? People that live in that community, people that work in that community, people who will therefore be invested in what happens to that section of neighborhood instead of having 3 or 4 neighborhoods all overseen by the one dude who is then overburdened by all the shit that happened in those neighborhoods and doesn't give a damn about the people in them.
Right. And also, don't get me wrong, there are certain budgets that kind of fuck up. Like, again, the last few years, I was in the American education system, like public schools and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the times, the American school budget kind of sucks.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong, it's just more of you got to find a way to make sure everything is balanced. Granted,
Yeah.
some things are not going to be, but it's just
Yeah,
what
that's the other part of it. Not only do you need more resources going to these things, but you also need to make sure that these resources actually go to the right shit. Because the problem is the people that are running these budgets don't actually know shit about they're not actually involved in the business itself. They're not actually involved in this case, the people that do the police budgets don't actually know shit about what it takes to be a police officer. So very often they put the money in the wrong areas, and then the areas that need it the most wind up making do with less in the same way that the American public school system does. There is not an American alive today that says we should pay teachers less, but when when there are like education budget boosts or increases to teachers' budgets, they often go more to repairing infrastructure rather than new textbooks, or they often go to the district superintendents rather than the actual teachers. And then the teachers still basically are living paycheck to paycheck, which makes them miserable, which between that and having to deal with rowdy fucking teenagers all day makes them less good at being teachers, which makes students hate school, which makes them bad at education, and that makes them less intelligent overall.
not to
Generally.
mention that there are teachers that are kind of underqualified.
Yeah. And it's the same issue with it's the same issue with the bad cops. Maybe if we had more resources and were smarter about how we used those resources, more importantly, the bad teachers and the underqualified teachers wouldn't get away with nearly as much shit as they do. Well, maybe if we reallocated the funds of the police departments rather than cutting them, so that they went to sensible shit, the bad police officers would be more noticeable and therefore would be easier to get rid of, in the same way as bad teachers might be. But in both cases, apparently the solution is, I know what we'll do to fix this broken system. We'll break it even further by removing all the resources they have. Wrong. It's like how do I convince my child not to do this bad thing? I know every time he does something I consider bad, I'll beat him within an inch of his life. That will teach him. Yeah, but he won't be able to survive after that enough times, do you see? That's sort of what you're doing. It's we need to punish these bad police officers, so we'll take away all their resources. Well, they can't learn how to use their resources better if you take away all their resources, can they? And a child can't continue to function better if you beat him within an inch of his life every time he does something wrong. It's the same principle. You're more concerned with vindictive punishment than you are with actually fixing the problem. Because you have an axe to grind with the people that did the wrong thing rather than actually addressing the problem. Moving on.
Mm-hmm. A Black Panther sequel is in the works from Coogler, and audiences can expect further exploration of this tension between policing and community support.
I kind of hope not. I mean, it would, like I said, the movie was good, and having those themes did make it more interesting than your average MCU movie. But like, I hope they don't just repeat the same shit that was in the first movie and expect us to treat it all like it's still profound, given that it wasn't all that profound to begin with.
Yeah, and I have nothing really to say. I mean, he's right.
Personally, my hopes for the Black Panther sequel would include like bringing in the Atlanteans, because the Atlanteans and the Wakandans always go to war with each other in the comics. So if there was ever going to be a place to bring in Submariner, it would be in a Black Panther sequel.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, I think Killmonger should be resurrected by Wakandan magic, both because I'm biased towards magical things, but also because that's a really cool aspect of him in the comics. Whenever he dies, somebody brings him back with Wakandan sorcery.
Again, I think if you and I had like some time, we could brainstorm a better, like a rewritten version of Black Panther. Like overall, it's not bad. It's just more of, it is still technically the same Marvel movie.
Mm-hmm.
Just it's a fine film. It's just not as great as everyone says it is.
Well, the reason people say it's great has nothing to do with the actual merits of the movie. It has to do with what it says on like the meta sense. And pardon me, but the meta sense, a movie that's really good in the meta sense doesn't actually make a really good movie if you can't be bothered to observe like narrative storytelling abilities and artistic license and shit. Not faulting Ryan Coogler, because I genuinely think he did the best he could with what he was given, and given that the movie made like $1.4 billion, hopefully they'll give him more freedom in the sequel, and he'll be able to make an even better movie. But then again, what the fuck do I know? Moving on.
Mm-hmm. All right, so next part: when superheroes and cops collide. And we have a picture of Miles Morales here. But actually, a pretty good movie. I would recommend checking that out.
Yeah, into the Spider-Verse is pretty good. It's probably the best Spider-Man movie we've gotten so far.
A lot better than the Marvel movies. I know that.
And as much as we all love the Sam Raimi movies from our childhood, they don't hold up nearly as well as you think they do. Generally speaking.
So, all right. So it's not just the superhero that superheroes act like members of law enforcement. Sometimes they interact with them directly. Yeah, because just like police officers, they are civil servants. Well,
At least,
public servants.
yeah, at least in an unofficial sense. Plus, if a vigilante was on that much bad terms with the police in any given situation, that would probably put them on the FBI's most wanted list, which probably makes superheroing much more difficult. So even just from like a pragmatic standpoint of I want to continue doing my job, they probably should at least maintain decent relations with the people that could be a massive hindrance to them if they wanted to. Because imagine a world where Superman, for example, doesn't keep on good terms with like the public and the American people and the police. I'm thinking that the military would get called in and nukes would be deployed in about 5/8 of a second whenever he went in a way that the public didn't think he should have gone. And that would not be good, even if Superman had the purest of possible intentions. Because nukes generally are kind of a bad idea. It's why they're referred to as the nuclear option. That's why the nuclear option is even a phrase. Because you can't unnuke a nuke. Moving on.
Mm-hmm. All right. Spider-Man has long had a complicated relationship with the NYPD. Last year's Spider-Man video game received some pushback over what many critics called copaganda. Oh yeah, Spider Cop. Okay.
Oh,
That's just him playing around with Captain Yuri Watanabe, I believe.
didn't we cover that? I thought we covered that.
I don't think we did.
Okay, maybe not.
But okay, for one thing, here's the context of it is Spider-Man has been working for like I believe 7 years in the game, in that story, and yeah, he has built up a pretty good rapport with the police officers because for most of the time, he handles petty crimes and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So he's always on the cop's side.
That's why he's referred to as your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, in contrast to somebody like Cap or Tony Stark or whatever, because he deals with it where other superheroes deal with characters who can do things that cops simply couldn't deal with, that are super powerful and therefore it would be dangerous for any human to be involved with. Spider-Man kind of whenever he's not dealing with his own rogues gallery, is kind of dealing with the overflow of stuff. He's the guy that deals with the cops' grunt work so they don't have to, so they can focus on the bigger stuff. So it makes perfect sense that he would be on good terms with them, and like I just outlined, it makes sense for any vigilante type character to want to be on good terms with the police, because if he weren't on good terms with the police could make his job a lot harder. Because Spider-Man is not immune to bullets, remember, which is kind of a plot hole with a lot of superheroes. Like, they're not immune to bullets. Why don't you just shoot them? But I can imagine if when the police saw Spider-Man and they started shooting at him, that would make his job as Spider-Man a lot fucking harder, especially if he were like in the middle of fighting a supervillain when it happened. Like, can you imagine that? Like, he's busy fighting Doc Ock or some shit, and the police are like, "Look, it's Spider-Man, get him!" Shoots him in the back while he's distracted by Doc Ock, and boom, we have no more Spider-Man. It's a really, really shitty ending, if you ask me.
Mm-hmm. So, in that game, Peter Parker is a fan of the police, ever fantasizing about being Spider Cop. He spends much of the game fixing surveillance towers for the NYPD. Okay, again, he has built up a friendship with the NYPD for 7 fucking years, and the Spider Cop thing is just him joking around with his friend and ally in the police department.
Yeah, not to mention the fact that if he did become a like lawfully deputized extension of the police, his job would probably be made easier because he would have things like the access to resources that the police have and or backup when he needed it or when he could handle. or when he could conceivably benefit from backup.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
he probably he's a kid, he's a small time kid from Brooklyn. He probably has a pretty
Queens.
positive opinion of his local police anyway. And B, if he were lawfully deputized, that would make his job a fuck ton easier.
Also,
And I bet he's probably dealt with more than enough people in the NYPD that he likes personally, so he has no reason to dislike them.
two things.
Moving on.
Brooklyn is Captain America, and Queens is Spider-Man.
Hmm?
You said Brooklyn.
Oh, sorry. Well, yeah. Sorry. He's a kid from Queens. I imagine he likes his local police officers fine, and if he's been helping them and cleaning up their grunt work for 7 years, then I imagine quite a few of them like him too. But either way, like I said, if he were an extension of the police, he would have more resources, and I'm sure he knows plenty of them personally by now, so he has probably, like, it's impossible to work with somebody for 7 years and not at least come away with a neutral aspect to them. Like, you honestly think he would work with the police if he thought that they were all evil scum?
Also,
Because I don't think that.
the surveillance
Go ahead.
towers, the surveillance towers things is he also uses them, and he had to fix them in order so you could use the map for the game. Like it was a mechanic.
Hmm.
All right, so about the introduction of Miles Morales, who made his debut in comics in 2011. Really?
Yeah,
Huh.
it seemed a lot longer than that, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. God, 2011. I was in middle school. I got a comic at a book fair, like the first volume of Miles Morales Ultimate Spider-Man.
Hmm.
I might still have it actually.
Yeah, I was in.
College.
I want no.
Oh wait.
2011 was, I want to say, sophomore year of high school, I think. Because I graduated in 2013, so yeah, like freshman, sophomore year of high school at least.
Could offer. All right. Could offer opportunities to explore the continuous relationship between New Yorkers and police. Miles, who is half black, half Puerto Rican, is the son of a cop. Okay.
So do you perhaps understand why he has a positive opinion of cops then? If his father is one? It would be really annoying and angsty if he like viscerally hated cops because his father was one.
All right. But I don't know why they have to bring up the whole half black, half Puerto Rican thing.
Because they're spinning a narrative about race at the moment, so of course everything is race related.
He's not even that interested in a character though, like in the comics.
I'm gonna have to take your word for that one because I'm
No, he's basically a carbon. See, here's the thing. On general premise, he's an interesting character because he has to take up the reins of Spider-Man, right?
Mm-hmm.
Granted, this was Ultimate Spider-Man, so I remember correctly, people said that Ultimate Spider-Man wasn't that great.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was a dick or something. Anyway, it's interesting because I've always been a big fan of legacy characters,
Mm-hmm.
but Miles in the comics was never that different from Peter. Like he was a smart kid who I think went to basically a lot of stuff in the MCU Spider-Man they took from the Ultimate Spider-Man comics.
Yeah. because they always borrow stuff from the Ultimate Universe when they're doing the MCU, unfortunately.
But I don't know. It's the fact that he's black or anything never really interests me, even back then.
Yeah, I didn't care one way or the other.
Like, you're not a big fan of Spider-Man. I am, though.
Yeah, true.
Honestly, they should just bring back Mayday Parker.
That was their daughter, right?
Yeah.
Him and MJ.
Yeah, Peter Parker and MJ's kid.
Before the freaking Mephisto deal.
Yep. Okay, but I digress. The character was created by Brian Michael Bendis, so
Yeah, that figures.
all right. But okay, where were we? In 2018's animated Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Miles' father doesn't know his son's secret identity. Miles spent much of the movie trying to reconcile his father's love for him with his dislike for Spider-Man as vigilante. Okay?
You're okay. Back up. I need to look at this again. You just got through saying how superhero vigilantes were too chummy with the police, and one of the points you came up with to demonstrate this was an example of when a superhero vigilante wasn't chummy with the police and how that was a character arc. What in the fuck? The thing you brought up directly contradicts the thing you were just talking about 5 minutes ago. What the fuck? Okay, moving on. Because I can't be bothered to unwind this Gordian knot of sheer stupid.
Mm-hmm. Spider-Verse sequel is in the works, and many fans hope it will focus more on Miles and less on Peter. But
The first one barely focused on Peter. It like just mentioned him, kind of.
yeah, and well, it was the legacy of Spider-Man, not Peter. Anything
Mm-hmm.
was the main focus, not really Peter himself.
Right.
Whatever. And deal with race more directly.
No. Categorically, definitively, no. They should not, in any way, deal with race any more explicitly than they did in the first one. That will ruin the movie.
I don't think they did in the first movie, or at least I didn't catch it.
Exactly my point. If they cram a bunch of BLM talking points into the sequel for no goddamn reason, it's gonna ruin the movie. My darling, you have to realize that things that appeal to you do not appeal to the vast majority of people because the vast majority of people do not agree with you. You can't simultaneously claim to be a rebel and then be surprised when most people don't like what you're selling them. You can't be a rebel and also have the unambiguous endorsement of everybody in the establishment. That's not how rebellion works. If you want to truly be a rebel, you have to deal with the fact that people don't generally agree with you. That's kind of the whole point. If people always agreed with the rebel, then there would be no need for rebel. Moving on.
Alright, so where was I? Alright, I already read that. Before that, a Miles Morales video game will arrive, hopefully with a more nuanced take on the NYPD than the game that preceded it.
More nuanced, meaning that you want the NYPD to basically be the villains of that piece. Because I get the feeling that any sort of positivity towards the NYPD in that game will be taken as some kind of unambiguous endorsement. That's what you mean by more nuanced, isn't it? Because we already tried being just casually sort of on good terms with them, and you didn't like that. So my guess is that by more nuanced, you mean collate my ideology some more, please. And in that case, fuck to the no, darling.
Mm-hmm. With a Spider-Man who's a young man of color in a city with a painful recent history of stop and frisk policies disproportionately inflicting trauma on young black and brown men, it will be a striking oversight if it doesn't. Okay, for one thing, this is a comic book universe in a video game. Completely different circumstances.
And for another thing, stop and frisk applies more often to young black men because A, they are more likely to be poor and lower class, and B, they are more likely to dress more confrontationally, i.e., like thugs and rappers, and C, generally speaking, in poor areas there is a higher propensity for crime. It would be stupid to say that there's absolutely no one on the police force who might have an issue with black people, but to say that that's the reason why they're more likely to be targeted by stop and frisk is just stupid. It's because they dress very often like thugs and rappers, and they're from poor, uncultured areas. Therefore, they get treated like potential criminals because for the people whose job it is to spot potential criminals, a poor thuggish guy with his hands in his pockets and wearing all sorts of gold chains and bling says this person is likely to be a criminal way more than a straight-laced guy of any color in, a suit carrying a briefcase. Because unfortunately, humans use these things called cognitive heuristics, which are basically your brain shortcuts. And your brain essentially is really, really bad about stereotyping. And which of it's essentially a game of which of these things is not like the other. And if you think criminal, you're probably less likely to think somebody who has enough money and resources to already afford a suit, even if that person happens to be black, mind you. Whereas if you find an uncouth poor person wearing thuggish clothes, you're thinking they're poor enough that they would consider stealing because they need the money and the resources. So duh, of course they would consider those types of people more threatening. Not to mention that those people very often are in gangs, and gangs are by their very nature more threatening and more criminal, because that's kind of what a gang is. It's a rowdy mob of fuckers going, we deserve shit because we're us. That's what a gang essentially amounts to most of the time.
So after that riveting tangent by Grand Wizard Dalton.
That is definitely not, I'm literally saying it's not because they're black, it's because a lot of them happen to be poor and criminal.
Oh, Ed Brewer says, yo, what up?
Hey, Ed.
As racist as profiling is, it's very effective.
What do you mean by effective? Do you mean that more people get caught, or do you mean that more crimes are stopped? Because to me, a criminal policy like stop and frisk would be considered more effective if it stopped more crime. Which, honestly, the jury is still very much out as to whether it does any good or not in that regard. My thing is, I would prefer stop and frisk not happen unless there were permanent body cams at all times by every police officer. I'm willing to accept stop and frisk if there is accountability for the people doing it, because I do realize there are there are people that are biased against certain varieties of people, but in a world where there are no body cams, there should not be stop and frisk, and in a world where there is stop and frisk, there should most definitely be body cams. That's sort of my position on the matter.
You done?
Yeah.
Okay. About the superhero property that most directly engages with corruption in policing is Watchmen.
You're probably talking about the Damon Lindelof show, because that most definitely was not an aspect of the comic or the Zack Snyder movie. And once again, I must point out, one of your examples of this done right is not a naturally organically evolving version of this. It's a forced one where Damon Lindelof got it in his head to make a show about police brutality and shit, and used Watchmen as a means to do it. And it had nothing whatsoever to do with the original Watchmen. No thing. But moving on. If you wanted to pick an Alan Moore thing that has to do with policing, I would have gone with V for Vendetta, because there is actually some context in there that might be it might have made your case a lot easier to make, is all I'm saying. Moving on.
Yeah. In Alan Moore's 1986 graphic novel, vigilantes who believe they have the right to fight and live by their own moral codes often prove themselves despicable bigots or megalomaniacs.
And what exactly the fuck does this have to do with goddamn anything? Humans have human flaws. Stop the presses. Why are you focusing on this specific angle? Why are you not focusing on any other, like, Watchmen is one of the greatest comics ever written for a reason. Why are you focusing on this one aspect of it in particular? Moving on.
Mm-hmm. One particular image of so-called heroes confronting a riot looks an awful.
Bless you.
Thank you. Awful lot like the recent videos we've seen of police officers shooting rubber bullets and tear gas at protesters.
You do realize what the difference is, right? The vigilantes, by their very nature, are vigilantes and are not expected to uphold the law of the land, because that's not their job. Police, in this instance, are reacting to peaceful protests being appropriated by violent anarcho-communists and other assorted radicals, and dealing with the destruction of both public and private property that has resulted in several deaths of actual human beings on several occasions, by the way. Do I think individual cops might be fucking morons and therefore might go way over the line sometimes? Sure. But I don't think the overall police response to the riots have been that unreasonable, or any more unreasonable than you can expect a massive crowd of fuckers to be at any given time. Because you give destructive implements to a crowd of people, and there's going to be mistakes made, no matter how careful the person is. Sorry, that's just human nature. To be human is to suck, at least in some ways. Especially if you get a group of us together and tell us to go wild with crazy fervor for no reason. Moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Still, the comic was a product of its time and its storylines that have not all aged well. Damon Lindelof's 2019 HBO series adapted from the comic remixes, with parentheses, No,
He
no,
didn't.
it's just air quotes.
It was considered to be a continuation, not a reboot or a remake, which is why it has virtually nothing to do with the original comic. No thing. I I just I can't tell if I'm more insulted as a comic book fan who actually likes Watchmen, or if I'm more insulted as someone who wants rational things to be said, who is now having to deal with the fact that this person knows nothing whatsoever about Watchmen and basically did a wiki search and then watched the show and thinks that they're reasonable facsimiles of each other. Either way, moving on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So. All right. The original story and serves as a spiritual sequel in recognitions of its relevance to the current moment. HBO made all episodes briefly available to watch for free on the Juneteenth holiday weekend.
I don't know either. Juneteenth is a fairly new phenomenon. I think it has something to do with the day that Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, I think, but I could be wrong.
Whatever. Unlike Moore's story, which ultimately becomes a tale of white men fighting over power.
What? Read that again. I need to process that in my brain.
Yeah, unlike Moore's story, which ultimately becomes a tale of white men fighting over power.
Of all of the incomprehensibly stupid things you could take from
But wait,
Watchmen,
there's more.
you're going to tell. Okay, first things first. Alan Moore, at least at the time, was experimenting with anarcho-communism. And you are telling me, you are honest to shit telling me that that 80s Alan Moore is not far enough to the left for you. I'm a Bernie Sanders supporter who would have gladly voted for either Andrew Yang or Tulsi Gabbard, mind you. I know I'm not far enough to the left for you, but you're honest to goodness telling me that 80s Alan Moore, crazy fucking far to the left Alan Moore, who made V from V for Vendetta wear red and black specifically to evoke anarcho-communist colors, is not far enough to the left for you and is apparently racist somehow. How in entire omniverses of fuck do you even function? Okay, I'm good for the moment. Go ahead. Present me with the more.
Lindelof show begins with the 2019 Tulsa Race Massacre. As Victor Wuckerson writes in The New Yorker, that event was the country's most significant incident of racial terrorism, during which the city's Black Wall Street was strafed by planes and burned to the ground by white supremacists, abetted by the National Guard.
What? Like, even knowing, like, the philosophical routes that these people are going down, because I have a philosophical background, I sometimes get stymied by just what universe do they think they are living in? Seriously though, what universe do you think that is a rational and justified commentary on the state of the world today? Like, I get that it's an allegory and I get that you're making a point through a story and everything, but the thing is, even when you're trying to make an allegory and you're trying to make a point through the story, the point still has to be, like, substantive and rational if it's going to reasonably apply to anything. Which leads me to the question, what universe do you honestly think that white supremacists are even common enough that such a thing could happen? Because by my estimate, there's like fewer than like 100,000 white supremacists in the world today. Like, honest to goodness, Richard Spencer, Andrew Anglin, David Duke style white supremacists. There's fewer than 100,000 of them in the entire world, and you're assuming that like masses of them will just spontaneously, emerge out of thin air, team up with the National Guard of all people, and burn shit to the ground. In a universe, mind you, where actual, honest to goodness, red and black clad, hammer and sickle waving anarcho-communists will actually show up to burn shit to the ground at a moment's notice in the current year, pretty much as I'm speaking. I can't. How can you be this absolutely fucking inverted to anything relating to reason or the universe in which you find yourself? I can't even. Moving on.
Right. Okay, so it's a true story that will be left out of schoolbooks, mislabeled a race riot, and deliberately forgotten. This misremembering of history becomes a theme of the show.
Sweethearts, I really hate the people who would just declare that you're projecting without examining your point of view, but do you not see anything whatsoever ironic about the terms deliberate misremembering of history? Because you may want to procure for yourself a mirror if there's nothing out. If you can honestly tell me that you see nothing whatsoever ironic about you saying deliberate misremembering of history, then please buy a mirror. You need one badly. Just I can't. I'm honestly like, normally I can at least think of some witty takedown of the stupid, but that's just a sheer abyss of stupid that I don't even think I can unravel. A person who has probably a grade school understanding of history that has been made worse by like critical theory and post-structuralism and postmodernism in college is talking to us about the deliberate misremembering of history. I can't even. Let's move forward and hope that there's something sensible that I can actually respond to at the end of this tunnel. Because I can't, like, you done me. I concede. I have nothing for this. Wow. Go ahead. Brainstorm. I'm guessing he left the room to go and get something and presumed I would be able to rant.
I'm back.
Okay, huzzah.
I will disappear again in a moment, but okay. So Ed Brewer says if you want to stop a protester, ask them what they want.
I'm sure a considerable portion of them will tell you the destruction of the white supremacist capitalist patriarchy and will define basically everything individualistic or liberal as the patriarchy and want to destroy it. Basically, the entirety of Western civilization destroyed and replaced with something that is almost categorically engineered not to work is what they want.
Mm-hmm. Right, okay, so also Ed Brewer says dead air. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I didn't realize Brainstormer had left, and I finished my rant a few seconds too early, I guess.
All right. So after that preface, the show fast forwards to modern day Tulsa and centers primarily on Angela, a cop pursuing a white nationalist terrorist group akin to the KKK.
The KKK has fewer than 2,000 members
Okay,
currently.
but this takes place in the Watchmen universe, so
Right, okay, but
also
there's nothing
they are
in the Watchmen universe to suggest that such a thing that would be any different. Like even in the 80s, the KKK was well and truly on the way out.
right. Also
So
those guys are inspired a lot by Rorschach. Not sure. I don't get
right, but Rorschach wasn't a white nationalist, hence the problem. He was a Randian objectivist. And therein lies the problem. They can't tell the difference between Randian objectivism and white supremacy. Now, I have my issues with Randian objectivism, mind you, but they don't include it being white supremacist because Randian objectivism is an entirely different category of right wing. And it's not even, in all honesty, that far to the right on most issues. It's libertarian as fuck on social issues. It just happens to be often la la land as far as economic issues are concerned. But that's neither here nor there. The main issue is these people think that somehow, Randian objectivism correlates with white supremacy. I don't know how. Like, there are completely different modes of thought. How can you not see how a group based on a character who was, by all accounts, a Randian objectivist, inspiring a group based on a Randian objectivist wouldn't devolve into white supremacy? There's a lot of things that a group based on a Randian objectivist might devolve into, like, you know, anarcho-communism, for example, but white supremacy was never one of the. Do we even know that Rorschach was white? Because, there was that whole he wore the mask the entire time thing. So, like, do we even know that Rorschach was white or would have even cared? Because that was the other thing. He refused to acknowledge his face was his face. So even if the person underneath the Rorschach mask was of Caucasian descent, he actively disowned his own face and saw the Rorschach mask as his face. And the Rorschach mask, as anyone should be able to tell, is black and white. So what evidence do we have that Rorschach gave even the minorest fuck about race? Because I can't find one. Okay, moving on. Although he said he was going to disappear again. Shit. I'm tempted to sing the song at the beginning of
I'm back.
Watchmen just to avoid the dare. Okay, huzzah.
I had to get some burgers.
Ah.
Oh, that's right. You don't like burgers.
I do not.
Still one of the weirdest fucking things about you.
And I absolutely adore the fact that, like, none of my demonstrable weird interests make you go but when I say I don't like a certain food item, you look at me as though I've sprouted a second head and slowly back out of the room, metaphorically speaking.
Everyone likes burgers, even vegans. They make that gross ass imitation.
Yeah, I don't. You and the vegans can agree on something, but I don't.
Right.
Your reaction to this is always hilarious.
All right. So, in order to fight them, cops have begun to cover their faces and adopt superhero alter egos, which actually, as a premise itself, is very interesting.
Yeah, but it's not handled well at all.
Oh no, not at all. It's a good burger, I guess. But yeah, it's an interesting idea. Like the whole what if superheroes were became the police force? Like they were the deputized police force.
It honestly would make a lot more sense given how much more powerful than the average human the average superhero is, and how much more well connected the people without powers even are. Like, because how much more efficient would the police be if they all had resources similar to like Batman or the Punisher instead of what they currently have?
Maybe
It
not
would definitely
Punisher.
be easier to catch criminals. The only problem is there would be the whole issue of determining the guilt of the person thing.
Right. All right. So the portrayal of the police is complicated. Angela, a black woman, is a cop and the hero of the show. She does also some objectionable things, like kicking the crap out of a suspect in an interrogation room and lying to the FBI.
Okay, a few things. The reason why she kicks the crap out of a subject and lies to the FBI is because the FBI, being a government bureaucracy, is inherently not to be trusted. This is like a quintessential trope of cop shows and cop movies and shit. The minute it gets kicked up to the feds, that's bad because the feds are bureaucratic fucksticks who can't be trusted. As for why she kicked the shit out of the suspect, I don't remember what the suspect in question did, but
Sounds
that's
like
probably that's probably just another one of those she's a badass cop cliches that every cop show does. They show the renegade cop doing unorthodox things to make them seem tougher than the average. And yeah, come to think of it, the whole premise of this article is police are bad, MK, and one of your examples of how to do it properly in implies that the police are good, MK. So what the fuck are you playing at once again? Do you remember your original point? Because it doesn't seem like you do. It seems like you forgot your original point halfway through and are now just basically delivering a manifesto of everything you think. Unless you're going with straight up nihilism where both sides are bad, like the white supremacist and the police are bad, therefore the entire world is fucked, which very well might be your bag because it's funny how many of these moralistic twits are also extremely nihilistic when you get right down to it. It's like, why would you bother with morality in a nihilistic universe, and why would you bother with nihilism in a morally charged universe? Like, these two things don't really go together, but somehow these people make it work. Hence the massive, like, Grand Canyon's worth of cognitive dissonance that they all have, it seems.
Mhm.
Moving on.
But as the mysteries unravel, it becomes clear that Watchmen's real intent is to revisit one of the most lauded stories in the comic book world and re examine it from the perspective of historically excluded black characters.
Okay, when in Watchmen, written by, again, extremely far to the left Alan Moore, mind you, in the 80s, where in Watchmen, any version of Watchmen where black people included, where I demand an example. Because I have read the comic, I have seen the movie, I have even followed Doomsday Clock to a certain extent, and I couldn't tell you a single area where black people were excluded. Nowhere. None. Yet. It does not exist. And yet your entire premise is this is so smart because it addresses this long-standing issue that does not fucking exist as far as I can tell. If you have an example, present one. If you don't, though, I'm gonna be pissed.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on. Oh, I fucking yawn.
I think we're gonna have to cut an article out for time purposes, though. After this one,
Maybe. Or just move it to next week anyway.
probably. All right. In doing so, the show reveals the connective tissue that links harm committed against black people from the Tulsa massacre to the racism that Angela deals with in the present day.
Okay, sweetheart, you do know that everyone suffers because of police brutality, right? What police brutality there is, everyone suffers as a result of it. Because police brutality is very often the result of people who crave power, authority, and attention getting their hands on power, authority, and attention when they shouldn't have it. Because as I've often said, and I don't know where I'm paraphrasing this quote from, but the people who seek power the most are the people least likely to use it correctly. And the people who should have power are probably the least likely to ever accept it. Not saying that all police are narcissistic or sociopathic or psychopathic or whatever. But what I am saying is to a certain proportion of people who are narcissistic, psychopathic, and sociopathic, the position of police, especially in the American context, is very appealing because those people like having power to make other people suffer, especially if they get to manipulate society while they do it in a lot of cases. In my opinion, that is a good case for stronger and more rigorous psychological screening because we really shouldn't be letting the people who want power that badly have it. But what the fuck do I know?
Yep. Excuse me. Black heroes rise up to meet the darkest force, one that's ignored by most superhero stories: racism.
The darkest force.
Okay, can I?
Ignoring the possible pun there, because I can't be bothered to be that crude.
Right. But can I bring up some examples of comic storylines that are pretty dark that don't involve racism?
Well, sure, but let me at least say this first.
Yeah, of course.
You genuinely think that racism is one of the darkest forces to exist in the world? Do you realize just how privileged you have to be to even get that far? To not have to deal with, I don't know, genocides or infantilization
Rape.
or death in childbirth or plagues or
Rape.
sanitation in general or starvation or the list of things worse than racism is miles long. I'm not saying racism isn't bad. I'm just saying to call it the darkest thing in the universe probably is a bit of a poetic exaggeration and a bit of a melodramatic one.
Oh yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I was going to bring up another Alan Moore story that is pretty well known and is pretty fucking dark. The Killing Joke.
Uh-huh.
Not only honestly, I would chop it up to a psychological thriller than anything.
Mm-hmm.
If we're going with genres, there's a pregnant woman's death in the story. While you're not seeing it, does happen. Commissioner Gordon gets mentally tortured through a literal roller coaster ride where he has to view the pictures of his naked daughter writhing in agony because she was shot.
Yeah, the Killing Joke is just to try and be punny about it. It's a barrel of laughs, isn't it? And then it was quiet.
I'm not giving you disappointed eyes. I'm just. It's like the quiet, what the fuck, man.
Well, I mean, I let the darkest force thing slip, so I think I was overdue for a bad pun.
Yeah. But, it's. That is, I will be honest, that is kind of the one that really came to mind, obviously, with Watchmen and Alan Moore and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But, again, and like you said, Dalton, there's a long list of things that are probably worse than racism. Not to say racism isn't bad, it's just.
It's also not like saying that racism can't ever contribute to the other shit. Like
Yeah.
racism can definitely lead to things like genocide if two races decide to go at it with each other. I'm just saying that racism by itself, all other things being equal, separate from, the other things that are listed there, is far from the worst thing ever. Still a bad thing, but if you told me that I could get the world to make sure that no one ever goes hungry, but there would still be racism in the world, I would make that deal in a heartbeat. Because starvation is probably a bigger deal than racism, and so on.
Mm-hmm. All right, so. All right, so Ed Brewer says a few things because I think we're on the last part here. So let me get the comments out of the way. Yeah, last part. So okay, so Ed Brewer said, well, at 9:29, I'm not sure what this is about. The movie is where they get that he's white. Might need
to talking about Rorschach.
Oh, okay.
But then again, like I said, just after that, I think I mentioned, even if the person who became Rorschach is Caucasian, he actively disowns his face, so it doesn't even matter that he's white.
Yeah. Oh, Rorschach was so fucked up. Anyway, he also says far left in the 80s is a right wing wacko by 2020 standards.
Well, but like, we're not talking just the standard 80s liberal. Alan Moore was a straight up anarcho-communist, or at least he was sympathetic to anarcho-communism for a while in the 80s. That's why B for Vendetta had the red and black color scheme, because it was supposed to be an analogy for anarcho-communism versus capitalism. Now, in the movie, they changed it so that it was classical liberalism versus fascism, but in the comic, it was definitely supposed to be anarcho-communism versus fascism, which is a really stupid dichotomy if you ask me. But then again, I'm not as many weed cigarettes in me as Alan Moore, so there's that. Moving on, I guess, unless Ed had any more comments.
He does not.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, the way forward is the last part.
Oh boy, this is
I just rolled, that is an eye roller right there.
Uh-huh.
All right, so if Hollywood is to do better in telling these stories, more creators of color need to be given the reins to tell them.
How about just more interesting, thoughtful, talented, and rational human beings in general. How about just all of the above? Like, can 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 we focus more on the kind of art that a person produces than the person who is producing it, please? That would be my personal definition of the way forward. Just do not give a shit about race or gender and instead pursue what storytelling is the best kind of storytelling and then make that kind of storytelling. That would be my bag, but what the fuck do I know? Once again.
Yep. All right. So where was it's worth noting that while Lindelof employed a diverse writers' room, probably diverse in skin, not in talent.
Or in terms of like self-expression or freedom of thought.
Mm-hmm. Uh, what was that? It's likely took his name in cash as the creator of Lost and The Leftovers to get such an ambitious story greenlit.
And even with that, apparently all he managed to make was a terrible, terrible sequel that nobody wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Which tells you maybe that this shouldn't have been greenlit in the first place. And I'm not saying it therefore shouldn't have been greenlit. I'm just saying that if somebody had said no to this, they wouldn't have entirely been wrong.
Yeah.
Now that being said, I would prefer if more things were greenlit in general because too many great stories and too many great ideas have been passed up because they couldn't be sold to TV executives or movie executives in the right way.
Mm-hmm.
And it sucks.
There's
But
actually a channel who talks about a lot of this stuff. Like movies that were never made. Greenlit.
mhm.
Super Void Cinema, if you guys are interested. Uh, I think I sent you
Nice.
a couple things. From
Weren't they the
it was that stop motion shadow puppetry one.
yeah, there we go. I couldn't think of the name.
Shadow King, I think, was what it's called.
Yeah.
Shame. Anyway, similarly,
Similarly,
similar, motherfuck.
similarly,
Similar. All right, fuck it. While the director of Spider-Verse, Peter Ramsey, became the first black man to win an Oscar for animation. Sony initially approached the two white men who ended up producing the film, Lego movie directors Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, with the opportunity to make an animated Spider-Man.
because Phil Lord and Christopher Miller managed to make a Lego movie that wasn't commercial slack. They managed to make a Lego movie work
Yeah, and they did.
Without making it product placement the movie.
Yeah.
Clearly they know what they're fucking doing.
They also made 21 Jump Street and 22 Jump Street,
which were fucking hilarious.
Mm-hmm. Even if they didn't direct Spider-Verse, I think you can tell that they're sort of.
Their fingerprints are all over that fucking thing, and it's one of the reasons I continue to think to myself, Phil Lord and at this point, I will watch basically anything that Phil Lord and Chris Miller make, just because I'm reasonably certain I'm gonna get some awesome shit out of it.
Which is exactly why I hate that they got fucked over with Solo.
I know. Can you imagine the universe where they got to finish that movie and do it the way they wanted to?
Yeah, like though preferably, I think the story idea I had for Solo would have been better than what they were doing. But
well, obviously, it's of course it's your idea, so you're fairly partial to it. But you know what? Honestly, I think that if they had been allowed to finish Solo the way they wanted to, it would have done so well they would have been asked to direct the next they would have been asked to do the next um main trilogy Star Wars movie, and then Rise of Skywalker wouldn't have been shite.
Yep.
I could definitely see a possible alternate past where Phil Lord and Chris Miller basically become the Kevin Feige of Star Wars. And that is not a terrible alternate universe.
Suck it, Kennedy.
Yeah, no, fuck you, you upward failing bitch.
Kathleen Kennedy, not. I feel like that has to be up.
Yeah, no ill will to any other famous or relevant Kennedys or anything. But yeah, Kathleen Kennedy, you have always ridden on the coattails of people more talented than you by basically being their business workhorse. And if you being in charge of Star Wars has proven anything, is the majority of that time you have been failing upward. So yeah, fuck you, my darling. And I would be saying that just as fervently if you were a man, before you even go there. And the things I have said about people like Michael Bay or Joel Schumacher would make you go white as a sheet. So don't even come at me with the misogyny accusation.
Yeah.
Okay, next.
Yeah. Writers must also shake the notion that they are bound by the strictures. Strictures?
It's a word.
Okay, for a second there, I thought she forgot to spell. She misspelled structure.
Yeah, I know, but it's a word.
Of outdated intellectual property.
Okay, you can fuck right off, my darling. If you don't believe in the value of a given intellectual property, there's a very simple solution. Don't use it. If, however, you want the credibility of using it, then you are beholden to the standards of that intellectual property. If you want to adapt a book, you are beholden to the book. If you want to adapt an old movie, you are beholden to the standards of that old movie, of either equaling or surpassing the original source material. That is your mandate when you adapt an IP. You cannot do this I'm gonna have it both ways thing where you take advantage of the credibility and substance of an IP, but then you don't actually find yourself in any way beholden to it. You do not own the IPs simply because you work on them. You are beholden to the IPs because you are supposed to be a steward of them. And that goes for original artists as well. The story should not be about you and how awesome you are as an artist. It should be about how awesome the art you're creating is and how that reflects on you positively as the artist who made that thing. God fucking damn it. It hit all, like, this article hit all of my buttons. And I'm out of interesting ways to tell this bitch to go fuck herself. And once again, if you heard the kind of shit that I said to Scott Mendelson or Rich Johnson, you would not be calling me misogynist for saying that. It has nothing to do with your gender. It has everything to do with the fact that your brain is a labyrinth of sheer stone cold wrong, dear. Okay, moving forward.
Yeah, Ed Brewer gave me a pronunciation of similarly. The fact that Ed gives me the pronunciation, and the fact that I'm not even actually reading the goddamn word right now, and I say it fucking perfect. Is that irony? I feel like that's irony there.
Like, you didn't, like, you started going all Porky Pig on us when you needed to actually say it, but now that you don't need to say it anymore, But hey, at least the chat will be recorded for posterity. So if you ever need a refresher on how to say it,
Similar. Come on. Similarly. Oh my god.
4 syllables, dude. You keep trying to push it into 3, and I think that's your problem. There are 4 syllables in the word.
True. Okay. Okay. So
Similarly.
I'm not gonna try it now. I'm not trying it now. All right. These days, few big budget projects move forward unless they are based on an existing IP.
Because people like this thing we call a return on investment. And generally speaking, if people previously liked a thing, then there's at least a proportion of the public that is going to continue to like that thing. And here's the kicker, and this is the thing that Hollywood always forgets. If you adapt the thing correctly, then you're probably going to end up converting people who otherwise don't know about the material. Because the thing is, film is a much more accessible media than books or comics because people actually have to go and find books and comics and then be sold by a given pitch in said book or comic. With movies, because they have a larger infrastructure and a larger user base, are much more democratic. That's why I advocate for when something that I love gets adapted, that they keep it as true to the source material as they can. Because I want to show people that wouldn't have given the material a chance in its original format how this thing is awesome. And I can't do that if they completely change the thing in question.
Right. But that said, and we've had these discussions ad nauseum.
Mm-hmm.
The main thing is you got to make sure to be respectful to the essentials of the IP.
Yeah,
But
we're
also,
not saying never change anything ever. We're just saying be as true as possible to the essence and the substance of the material. Or if you want to make changes, then try to make sure that they're not changes for the sake of changes. They're changes for the sake of possible improvements. Like I said, my standard is always, is the changed thing as good or better than the original thing? And if the answer is no, then that change probably shouldn't be made unless it absolutely has to be for like financial reasons or like transition from one medium to the other reasons.
all right. So, but the success of Watchmen suggests that creators can snatch up those familiar characters and still weave a new story with new
What
politics and a new perspective using only fragments of what came before. I just had to finish it.
what success? Because as far as I'm aware, the ratings are fairly like minimal. Like it's not like Watchmen became the next Game of Thrones. It's barely hanging on to the ratings. By what standard can you call that a like categorical success? That's my question. Because I don't think Watchmen will make it to a season 3 if they've already greenlit season 2. If they've already greenlit season 2, personally. It's not even as well liked as season 1 of American Gods was when that came out. Moving on.
Yep. Okay. Just as The Watchmen series is a radical departure from a dusty Reagan era graphic novel. What the?
You daft bitch. You just got through saying how it apparently was similar to the source material, and now you're proudly and brazenly referring to Watchmen, one of the like go-to definitive graphic novels of the British invasion era, and you're calling it a dusty Reagan era graphic novel? What the actual fuck are you playing at? Are you trying just to piss everyone off?
Right,
Because
question
you
is,
might be
though,
succeeding.
I'm curious though, what the fuck is a Reagan era graphic novel?
Because it was produced during the
Well, no,
administration of Ronald Reagan.
I know that, but obviously she has to mean something by that. Like,
Because it was influenced heavily by like the Cold War and Reagan era politics is what she means, I'm guessing.
okay, just again, it's
In her mind, nothing can exist without being a reflection of the politics of the era that it comes from. So therefore, calling something Reagan era will qualify something. I'm sure someday they'll refer to like they'll refer to like um some they'll refer to a modern graphic novel as like a Trump era graphic novel if it bothers to ever hit it big to like disparage it and minimalize it. And they wonder why we say we'd like you to stop focusing on goddamn politics for 5 seconds.
yeah. Right. I don't know. It's really fucking stupid. Anyway, both Black Panther and Into the Spider-Verse borrowed the names and backstories of their main characters from the comics, but took those characters in new and ambitious directions. Black Panther for the meh, Spider-Verse for the better, because she's not
They
wrong.
didn't. Okay, but they didn't really change their backstories significantly. Did a fairly, they did a fairly one to like not an entirely one-to-one translation from the comic, but they did a fairly direct translation.
Although
It's not
Miles,
like the only massive departure for Miles was the fact that in this version he was getting his powers during the Spider-Verse like
well,
connection.
also because he has a lot more personality.
Well, yeah, but that's mostly due to the original having lazy writing more so than it is like it's not really a change. It's just adding something that honestly should have been there to begin with.
Yep.
It's kind of like how Freddie Freeman isn't really different in the Shazam movie than he was in the comic. He just had a personality, whereas in the books he really didn't.
Wait, did we ever do a review of Shazam?
I thought we did.
We might have. I just don't remember.
I thought we did because I remember talking about how much I used to hate Freddie Freeman as a character in the comics, but the movie actually managed to make me like him.
Yeah, I think we did. I don't remember what everything was said.
I'll look and see what number it is. I'm sure it's listed somewhere.
Mm-hmm. All right,
If
but
we did
yeah.
do it.
All right, so what we were getting at is, yes, these characters were changed mostly for the better. Black Panther, again, I would say meh, although he's not really changed in any real significant way, or the story, I guess.
Yeah, it's not a radical departure. It's not like what Bryan Singer did to the X-Men. It's
Uh,
not stripped down or palette swapped or changed around for no goddamn reason like a lot of the like 90s and early 2000 comic book movies were. It's a fairly faithful adaptation of what the characters are in the comics. It's just with some added stuff. Yeah, so if your point is radical departures can sometimes be good, then those are bad examples because they're not radical departures from the source material. They're honestly pretty straightforward adaptations of the source material.
moving on.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Only when this creative freedom is encouraged and Hollywood offers more opportunities for BIPOC creators and white creators use their capital to support creators who are too often overlooked. Will we get more superhero tales that adequately grapple with the complexity of justice in America? Motherfucker, we already get that in superhero stories.
There are so many other themes that superhero stories can touch on. Why are you constantly digging them into this hole? And incidentally, the minority of creators that we really need to honestly be hearing from are good ones of any color, any race, any creed, any nationality, any whatever the fuck. The question of a person should not be, are they any given demographic? It should be, are they were are their contributions something that would enrich the material? If yes, then they should be permitted to do so. If no, then they should work harder so that they can become something that could enrich the material.
Hello.
Yeah, hi.
And if anyone doesn't get that, it's a bit I do when Dawn mentions something that kind of
Yeah,
portrays me as,
when something I say becomes somewhat self-descriptive, then Brainstormer goes, "Yo."
yeah, pretty much. All right, so that was the end of the article. Thank God we got that over. Only took us about two or so hours.
That person. It's funny how much people can say without actually saying anything of substance.
All right, so to kind of to a 180, not 180. What's the reverse?
To contrast the abyss of sheer just what the fuck that was that article, let's focus on something positive, namely Guillermo del Toro doing Wizards, because yes.
Yes. Okay, so this is from Geek Tyrant. The by well, this was published 4 days ago, so the 8th of July. It's by Tony Williams. So yeah, Guillermo del Toro's Wizards set to launch on Netflix next month. So this is part of a trilogy of series, uh, Tales of Arcadia saga. Yeah, so Wizards is the third and final series for Guillermo del Toro's Tales of Arcadia saga that started with Troll Hunters and continued with Three Below. I haven't seen Three Below, but I have seen Troll Hunters. I need to watch the most current season.
I'm game for pretty much everything that Guillermo del Toro does, although admittedly his version of Pinocchio concerns me.
I'm still willing to watch it. I just
Yeah, I'm still gonna see it because it's still Guillermo del Toro,
yeah.
but it doesn't seem like he's approaching that property with quite as much like creative objectivity as he should, and it seems like he's going all "love me, daddy" with working through his daddy issues with it, and that's not exactly
I think I
like
wrote, I think I wrote an essay on Guillermo del Toro once,
hmm.
like for a school
I
thing.
actually have a hmm. I actually have a book he wrote that's like all of his notebooks and stuff. It's called Cabinet of Curiosities. Um, it's a really interesting read if you ever want to like get into his like mindset and just like observing how his mind works is fascinating.
Mm-hmm. But you know, I think I did write an essay for school on Guillermo del Toro.
Hmm. How'd you do? What class was it for?
Uh, I don't remember.
It must have been like English or something, unless it was that film class you were telling me you were in that one time.
No, that was I did bits for Bruce Lee, Dwayne McDuffie, and someone else. I can't remember. It's been a while, and my memory's not great.
Hmm.
All right, so the show is being once again being made by DreamWorks Animation, and will premiere on Netflix next month. Okay, DreamWorks Animation series tells the story of wizard in training Doxy, I believe,
Hmm.
Colin O'Donoghue. I'll look that up. Irish actor, of course.
Hmm.
Uh, what? Captain, it's Hook
Oh,
from Once Upon a Time.
from once.
Yeah.
Killian.
Holy shit.
It's a small world after
Yeah.
all.
And other heroes of Arcadia on time travel adventure that takes them to the medieval realm of Camelot.
Okay, you have my attention.
Well, Trollhunters does have Merlin, so
Well, yeah, so it makes sense, but that's why I'm excited because if they're basically doing a series that will expand all the lore and explain all the plot holes and stuff, then I am so game I could cry.
mhm. Many members of the cast are returning, including Emily Hirsch, Lexi Medrano, Charlie Saxon, Stephen Yeun, David Bradley, Lena Headley, Fred Tatasciore, if I'm saying the last name wrong, I'm sorry, Clancy Brown, Diego Luna, Mark Hamill, and Kelsey Grammer.
And that cast officially feel that this is probably going to be awesome.
Meanwhile, Alfred Molina, Stephanie Beatrice, James Faulkner, and John Rhys Davies will be joining the cast.
Yeah, you definitely have my attention. This is very, very good.
Mm-hmm. Talking about this final chapter, Del Toro said, Wizards brings the trilogy full circle. It's a show that explores the origins of the entire mythology and also an adventure that propels it into the future. We reunite with old friends and get to understand old foes.
In the immortal words of Fry, shut up and take my money.
You have Netflix, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I might have to get another card for another month. Maybe, I don't know. Anyway, showrunner and executive producer Mark Guggenheim. Oh, Guggenheim's on this.
This is good.
Yeah. Released the following statement about Wizards. Wizards follows a time-honored tradition of many trilogies in that the concluding chapter returns to settings, characters, and concepts established in the first. At the same time, however, Wizards is very much its own animal, drawing on characters from both Trollhunters and Three Below and placing them in a completely new environment that is actually old, Camelot.
Okay, once again, you are speaking my language.
Mhm. Although Wizards is the shortest of the three series at 10 episodes, I'm blown away by the amount of story we were able to push in this season.
Wait, so there aren't going to be multiple seasons of it? What the fuck? That makes me a little sad.
Well, 10 episodes, so they could have it be kind of, well, not movie length, but at least a good hour or something
Mm-hmm.
for each episode, maybe. I don't know. I'm blown away by the amount. The narrative literally spans centuries and contains some of the most emotional content of the entire trilogy.
Okay, I'm gonna sound really bitchy and robotic for this, but I'm not really sure I care so much about the emotional content. The emotional content's nice and all, but I'm mostly here for the awesomeness and the lore. So
And I approve of the emotional content because unlike Dalton, I am not cold and unfeeling. No offense.
well, I'm not saying I don't want the emotional content. I'm just saying it's not really a selling point. I'm familiar enough with Guillermo del Toro that if he want, like, I know that if Guillermo del Toro wants me to feel the feels, he can make me feel the feels. He made me like a movie where a woman falls in love with an Amazonian river god who is also the creature from the Black Lagoon, and he won an Oscar for that movie. So,
I still need to watch
Shape of Water.
Shape of Water. Thank you. I feel like you're giving me a stink eye at this point.
Only a little bit. It's my equivalent to like the I am disappointed look.
Oh, tell me where I can find it and I'll watch it.
Okay, actually, funny you mentioned that. I watched I watched that with my boyfriend a couple weeks ago, so I can probably just ask him where he found it when we were watching it together.
All right, so Wizards will premiere on Netflix starting August 7th. And knowing you, Dylan, you would want to cover it, so we might make that a review, like a series review or something.
I probably will. Yeah.
If I didn't bring it up now, you'd probably beg me.
I'm not sure I would beg, but I would definitely be
You would beg.
pushing
You,
it.
you would beg.
I doubt I would beg. I would more likely be, yeah, we're covering this. And you still need to watch fucking Three Below. So we've got some catch up to do, because I probably will want to revisit the entire series at that point, given that Wizards is supposed to be the capstone.
Yeah, it's been a few years since I've seen Troll Hunters, so yeah. All right, so kind of our last thing. I feel like this would be. We are cutting out the other article Dalton, for next week because.
All right.
Yeah, but this one. Amazon's The Boys Season 2 teaser trailer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really think we've covered much of The Boys. I mean, we covered like one video essay talking about it, but
well, we also covered the feminazi character.
Oh yeah,
they
Stormfront.
Turned was it Stormfront into?
Yeah, Stormfront, who in the comics is a dude and is also apparently the name of a Nazi forum.
A white nationalist website. Yeah.
White nationalist website. I thought it was a forum.
It's both.
Okay.
It like is a website, but it also has a forum, and the forum probably gets more use than the like news function, quote unquote,
right.
News.
There's actually a teaser that shows Stormfront, like full Stormfront, doing a live stream off her phone.
And once again, Eric Kripke, if you, sir, have the balls to make fun of third wave feminism via this character,
actually, I think
my hat will come off to you.
I think she's still. I think she's just a regular Nazi. Either way,
uber feminist.
Kudos.
So, with any luck, this will be making fun of third wave feminism. And if you have the balls, Eric Kripke, then I will applaud you.
Yeah. All right. So, got about 2 minutes.
And I will defend you in the event that you immediately become Me Too'd after that, because it's bound to happen.
All right. I feel like we gotta have something.
I can't think of anything particular that's like boys related.
Edgy?
I guess, yeah.
Because that's what it is.
Yeah. Oh, right. Edgy.
Yep. Edgy.
Federal authorities have initiated a multi-state manhunt for William Butcher.
If anyone spots William Butcher or any of his known associates, Marvin Mill, Q Campbell, or this man, please call 1-888-0-CRIME.
Why wouldn't you just call 911? Question mark.
Maybe it's a soup hotline.
Maybe, but still, like, couldn't they just answer regular police calls? If that, like, because like in comics and stuff, you have superheroes like patched into police frequencies and listening into police scanners and stuff. So why?
All right. Okay. So full disclosure, like a couple days ago, like Friday, I think, I tried to watch The Boys. Like I got Amazon and everything, so I tried to watch it, and I couldn't get
Mhm.
through like the first 12 minutes of it, like first episode. I just
Uh,
it because I'm sure everyone knows by now it's not my kind of superhero stories.
yeah, Brainstormer may be a little bit of an edgelord sometimes, but he's not that much of an edgelord.
When have I ever been an edgelord?
So, sometimes you add a few too many layers of drama to your characters. It's like you could almost get away with the world's smallest violin trope in some of the stories.
Okay,
But
true.
I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying like
You gotta
a
admit,
little bit of edge every now and then is nice because the world, unfortunately, that we live in isn't perfect. But
you gotta,
there are times that there's a difference between being edgy, I guess. That's what I'm saying.
hey Don, you cut out like when you said edge.
Okay, let me disconnect and come back in then.
Believe it or not, folks, this always happens. I don't know if it's just me or if it's just Dalton or whatever. Yeah, dead air. I'm not a singer, so I'm not gonna sing for you. Good? Dalton, if you're talking, I can't hear you.
No, I hadn't said anything yet.
Oh, okay. It
Can
just
you hear me now?
yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Edgy.
I thought we had okay.
Well, I forgot what I was gonna say as I was reintegrating. So
All right.
moving forward.
Yeah, edgy.
The world still needs superheroes. So let's get out there. Let's take these cocksuckers down.
We are famous now.
Don't you worry.
So that's We Don't Start the Fire, I believe an instrumental cover.
Yeah. It's a really good song.
It's been a while since I've heard that song. It's not really like a go-to for me in music.
It took until I saw a version that actually has the years like annotated that it took that long for me to figure out that each like list of names or list of things in that song each happened in a particular year. So it's supposed to be like a commentary on the flow of history, kind of.
Okay. So we have here a scene where Homelander, because if I remember correctly, because I know pretty much everything that's happened in season 1 of The Boys.
Mhm.
Homelander destroyed a plane full of passengers in order to push the agenda of having supes, superheroes, well, superpowered individuals in the military,
Mhm.
which is, it's pretty fucked up, if I remember the scene correctly, with how Homelander did it.
Yeah. Huh.
And he plays people like a fiddle.
Yeah. Huh.
But here we have protesters that say no soup arms race and stuff. So part of me thinks there may be some information about certain stuff is starting to leak out.
either that or they're making fun of like the
Protest.
whole, huh? Well,
Protest.
they're making fun of protesters, sure, but they're probably making fun of the whole like certain people shouldn't be allowed in the military thing, and how that's a big hot button issue for some people. But the thing about that is, I'm hoping that they're intentionally making fun of it, because if they're serious and they're gonna try and convince me that superheroes are oppressed because they can't join the military,
I think you're looking at too much from a political perspective, Dalton, and not from the story perspective.
oh, maybe, but there have been enough of these type of shows that have gone that direction that I feel sort of justified in at least wondering if that's the route they're gonna go. Are they making fun of the attempt to do that, or are they making genuine like superheroes or synonymous with the oppressed references or whatever the fuck? Because if they do that, I have to point out the fact that superheroes have goddamn superpowers. They basically categorically cannot be oppressed in this instance. When you can tear through human spines like they're made of tissue paper, I'm sorry, but at that point you have lost your qualifier as oppressed status.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have the new 7. A-Train, Queen Maeve, Stormfront, Starlight, Black Noir, and Homelander. Wait a minute.
How is Maeve spelled, by the way?
I believe it's Maeve.
Okay, so they actually took that from the medieval spelling of Mab, come to think of it, which I'm just now noticing. I don't know if I've ever noticed that before, but yeah, that character is named after a fairy queen. Lol.
Okay, so it is a new 7. At first, I thought there were 6 at first when I looked at the screen, but no, it's 7. So. But I mean, honestly, I gotta say it looks pretty good. The desaturation, because I remember in the actuals, first season wasn't so desaturated much.
I don't know to what extent I like that. It depends on the route they go storytelling wise, whether or not I like that, I think.
Yeah, I don't mind it with this show being desaturated. Again, it just
because deconstructive cynical nihilism is kind of the whole point of this show. Yeah. It's just I don't like when shows randomly change their aesthetics out of nowhere. So like, and if you're gonna make fun of like the super positive view of superheroes, shouldn't they at least outwardly look positive to sort of highlight the contrast of like, this is their public face versus this is how they are in actuality, kind of thing?
Yeah. Overall, this teaser does open up issues, well, not issues, but questions about what happened at the end of season 1.
Mm-hmm.
Like Billy Butcher, how did he escape Homelander? A-Train was dying, so that's kind of confirmation because he's shown at the seat.
Mm-hmm.
That so he lived apparently, and Starlight is still on the team. Granted, she's wearing that skimpy outfit, which I don't mind. It's more of, I think, symbolically, it shows that she's kind of under the thumb of Vought.
Yeah, because they want her to, because sex sells, and they want to use her as the sex symbol. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not a bad costume overall. Just again, it's the symbolic nature of it that I think is my problem.
It's sort of like slave Leia's bikini in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, pretty much. But a lot less skimpy than Leia, actually,
Yeah,
which is funny, I think.
make metal bikinis great again. God damn it.
All right. Edgy?
Edgy.
Daddy's home. I know we've been through some shit together.
Okay. That was like 9 seconds left. My bad.
Yeah, that wasn't really enough to comment on.
This is a fucking mess. We're the most wanted lads in the country. So what's your big plan? You'll love it.
I won't.
Okay. Well, there were some things I found interesting in there. Homelander with his son, I think, trying to see if he has powers by throwing him off the roof of his house.
Like, I get this, but like, you do know that if he doesn't have them, dead, or even if he has like powers that are different that aren't gonna, that would be the ultimate fuck you, is if he had powers but powers that weren't any good at helping him in that situation, and he ended up triggering them, but they didn't help.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of season 1, they showed a cut where his eyes are starting to glow red. So
Yeah. And mind you, in the comics, I believe, Homelander's family was dead, so
well,
this is a
actually,
change.
the thing is
This
that
is a change for the better, I think. They let him actually keep the son this time.
actually that in the comics it was Black Noir, who's a clone of Homelander, that raped Butcher's wife, and the baby kind of got its way out of Butcher's wife with its laser vision.
Huh.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. The boys comics really edgy.
Yeah, that's why we picked the word we picked, and yeah, edgy.
1 second. Although I am curious if they are going to keep, because it just seems like it actually is his kid and not Black Noir. So I'm curious on how they're going to handle Black Noir, because I don't know if they're going to keep that he is a clone or something. So it's kind of interesting to see what they do with that. All right. Edgy? Uh, uh, no, and if you're talking, I can't hear you.
Hello. My phone crapped out again, stupidly.
Where did we lose you?
You were curious if they were going to keep, and then it cut out.
Black Noir. Because in the comics, he's supposed to be like a clone that was meant to kill Homelander if he ever went rogue, but that never happened. So Black Noir became crazy and kind of fabricated this whole thing, series of events, so that he could kill Homelander. He raped Billy Butcher's wife in the comics, which was the kid that killed his wife because its laser eyes accidentally.
It's possible that the kid is going to turn into Black Noir in the show. Like, he and his dad are going to have some kind of falling out. He's going to go bad and basically go all Brightburn on his ass.
Right. I'm just curious about Black Noir because so far in the show he's just been mainly like a comic relief kind of character, while also being.
I was going to say, I thought they had Black Noir in the.
They do, but in the comics, Black Noir was a clone of Homelander, and like I said,
so it's okay. Here's my thinking. My thinking is maybe that after Sonny Boy and Daddy Dearest have their little falling out, the kid winds up killing the Black Noir that we've had so far and taking his identity to fuck with his dad.
Yeah, but the kid's only like 9, I think.
Yeah, but he's also a clone, so there could be some like accelerated aging thing, or he might like willingly choose to accelerate his aging to be able to stand toe to toe with his dad.
Dude, where do you get that the kid? Where do you get the idea that the kid's a clone?
My thinking is that that the company that makes the Superheroes created the child out of Homelander's DNA to fuck with him.
No, the kid is a natural born from Homelander. Like that's because
right, but
Billy's wife had an affair with Homelander.
Right, it could still be a setup though. It could still be that like she's kind of like Silver Fox was in Wolverine Origins. She could be working for the organization that creates all the supers, and this could all be just to screw with Homelander.
You haven't seen The Boys, have you?
I've seen most of it. I haven't watched the entire thing. I've mostly filled in the gaps with looking at the Wikipedias.
Billy's wife did work for Vought. She was the social media manager for Homelander.
Mm-hmm.
Hence the affair with Homelander.
Yeah.
The baby is natural.
Yeah, and how easy would it be to reveal, I was working for them the whole time. I was supposed to seduce you so that we could have a child. And then the child turns evil, and it becomes a whole thing.
Well, how can the child become evil if Homelander's already the big bad?
Because having the child might bring out his like inner humanity. Then he finds out he's betrayed, gets mad, goes on a rampage. He and the kid have the falling out, and the kid becomes the nemesis.
I always think
maybe I've seen too many of these kind of shows where the happiness gets pulled out from under the hero just as they're acclimating to like happiness and joy. But I could definitely see a situation where Vosh is puppeteering the strings so that this all gets set up so that they can have basically what amounts to a big climactic season finale, kind of like what Megamind tried to do with Titan in Megamind when he defeated Metro Man.
I would honestly think, because Homelander, Homelander's not the hero. Like public eye, sure, but in reality, he is the villain. I would
Yeah.
kind of assume his son would be the actual hero. Would be the more Superman archetype.
Which in the parlance of the boys means he either has to die or turn evil, which is why I think that's how it's gonna go. He's either gonna have to die or he's gonna turn evil.
Yeah, well, that sucks.
Because the boys is stupid and edgy and deconstructive, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm being cynical in terms of how I'm anticipating their cynicism, but I don't think that if there's any kind of happiness or happy bond between Homelander and his son, that's gonna last very long. Either one of them is gonna die, one of them is gonna piss off the other, and they're gonna go rogue. They're gonna turn evil. It's gonna be a big puppet master plan by Vosh all along. Something like that's gonna happen.
Well, there's
These kind of shows never let happiness stand for very long, and it annoys the shit out of me. But I can see it kind of coming.
honestly the only real quote unquote deconstructive superhero show I'm kind of looking forward to is Jupiter's Legacy. You know, it's going to be on Netflix. I don't know when, but
I don't think I've heard of that one.
it's based on a Mark Miller comic.
Ah, okay. I vaguely remember hearing something about that.
Yeah, there's
But
actually
I didn't make the connection until just now when you said that.
kind of interesting. Anyway, back to this edgy, right?
Edgy.
Love it. I never love it. Never fucking love it.
Noted.
So montage, a lot of weird shit.
Mm-hmm. I do like their use of "we didn't start the fire." It really does fit I think the kind of irreverent tone they're going for. Not
Mhm.
irrelevant.
So we have a look at Stormfront using her powers. Costume doesn't look too bad, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Red and black.
I feel like that's a commentary because of the Antifa colors, but I don't want to go ahead and say that.
I was gonna
Definitely.
say the uniforms of the Nazis. You were
Yeah,
taking
but I don't think she is a proper Nazi. I think I hope, and I remember saying this when we covered there were two articles that covered this. There was the one that said they're changing Stormfront to a feminist, and the one where they said they're changing the feminist character to a Nazi. And I'm hoping that Eric Kripke is smart enough to make the parallels between modern day intersectional third wave, like critical theory feminists, and the Nazis. But it is also possible she could just be being a Nazi and using the feminism as her cover. But that I think would be less. I think it would be less smart. My thinking is make her a third wave feminist, make her genuinely believe that she's doing the right thing, and have her still basically more or less act like a Nazi because they're essentially similar philosophies. And if you do Eric Kripke, I will take my hat off to you because you will have balls of that one. Not until then.
Okay.
Gee.
Well, I was gonna say that like the first season, there's a lot of blood and guts and just.
Mm-hmm.
Also, you got Homelander drinking, I think, breast milk, because this was the whole thing with him in the first season.
Mm-hmm.
The guy is so fucked up.
Uh-huh.
I mean, that happens when you raise him in a fucking lab.
Yeah, as like a militaristic super soldier turned like public icon. No wonder he has like 47 flavors of sociopathic narcissism. What else would happen? He's the Anakin Skywalker of the superhero like pantheon, I guess.
Oh,
He's what if Anakin Skywalker was also Superman, basically.
or what if Superman wasn't raised by the Kents and by the Luthers, essentially, I guess.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Which in Smallville, Lionel kind of tried every now and then.
Mhm.
Of course, that kind of went out the window when they did the body switch episode.
Wasn't the greatest show, but it had a lot of cool, interesting moments and ideas.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Edgy?
Edgy.
Sorry.
Ain't you twits lucky that I showed up?
I guess that's everything.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's everything. So it comes out September 4th. Hence the teaser, which actually is a teaser for once.
Yay.
Okay. So there was a quick scene here of Homelander crushing a man's skull, or like the top half of it. So yeah, sociopath.
Yeah.
Or okay. I'm vaguely aware of the difference between sociopathy and psychopathy.
Okay. Psychopathy usually is congenital, which means it occurs at birth. Sociopathy is the result of, or is usually the result of abuse.
Okay. So
And one of them is principally essentially a defect that prevents someone from examining emotions. Sociopathy is that plus a particular hatred for the structures of civilization.
okay, so Homelander is a sociopath just because of his upbringing, obviously.
Mhm.
Okay. Then I'm thinking Black Noir might be a psychopath in the show, if that's the case.
So you think that the version in the show might be playing comic relief to throw everybody off the set? Like he's secretly intelligent and secretly
Well, okay, he's supposed to be the Batman anyway, so
Mhm.
he has to be pretty smart. And there's another clip that was released where he goes on a tactical assault of sneaking around and killing a bunch of people in a terrorist hideout.
Mm.
And some people, the guy who plays Gus Fring from Breaking Bad is in this show. And I remember someone saying that maybe he's Black Noir, like he's the main boss guy, like the CEO of Vought. Which would be cool because the guy who played Gus Fring, I can't remember his actual name at the moment, but he's an amazing actor.
Yeah.
I think he's in a video game too coming out. So, yeah. It's a Far Cry game, I think.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, I have nothing really to say about the teaser because, well, one, it's a teaser, and I've never been a big. I'm not really a fan of The Boys. Just kind of looks like more of the same, but also a little more.
Which is what a second season it should be. So, I guess good for you, Eric Kripke.
I don't know. We might do a review of like the first episode maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Other than that, I got nothing really else to say. So, comic recommendations, Don?
Yeah. You can go first.
All right. Well, I'm going to recommend a couple of things I've watched that are based on comics. So last night I watched The Old Guard. You know, the Charlize Theron movie,
Mhm.
which is actually based on some comics. It's not bad. The trailers I don't think really didn't really sell you on. We're not really big on. The trailers weren't good on selling the movie,
Yeah, no.
but I think the movie itself is actually fairly good.
Okay, noted.
Um,
Maybe I will check it out.
and I will also recommend Warrior Nun, which is based off an Image comic from the 90s, I believe, which is Warrior Nun Ariel.
Hmm.
Which I think in some way the show is supposed to be like a spiritual successor to the comic.
Hmm.
It's not bad. It has some moments of SJW stupidity, but those are few and far between, and they're kind of played for laughs.
Mhm.
All in all, it's really interesting. It's like Evil Dead meets kind of The Witcher.
Okay, that interesting.
And by Witcher, I mean like the Netflix version.
Mhm.
Mainly like how it looks.
Mhm.
Plus, they got a character called Shotgun Mary, who's badass.
I would imagine so, given her name is Shotgun Mary.
She drinks a lot.
Mary, did you know that virgins can still get fetal alcohol syndrome?
Oh, she's not a nun.
No, I was making a weird joke.
Yeah.
'Cause there's a old Christmas song called "Mary Did You Know," and since this is a story about a nun, that was the first thing that popped into my head. A shotgun wielding drunk version of the Virgin Mary.
But yeah, it's a good show. It's 10 episodes. I I'd still recommend. And like the same I've been doing for a while now. Sandman, Dream Country, and Doom Patrol.
Hmm. And just so that I can recommend a few different things, Mike Mignola has a occult detective character called Joe Golem that I've been doing a lot of research in recently. I haven't read his comics yet, but it's Mike Mignola, so I'm within a decent shot of finding something I like. So there's that. Also, like I've been recommending for ages now, if you haven't read the Dresden Files and you're at all interested in like the occult detective archetype type character or urban fantasy or anything relating to the supernatural or like pulp detective stuff, you should read the Dresden Files. There are 15 books. It's going to be 17 books by the end of the year, and there are comics and different stuff based on it, so knock yourself out.
Right. So with that, folks, I want to say goodbye, adios, aloha, auf Wiedersehen, sayonara, peace, cheers, and
Shalom, nafaka.